Hey loves, welcome back. So this is the part 2 of the drafted video on our channel. Go check it out if you haven't, and let's start the sewing. Welcome back, guys. So I'll be using this crepe fabric, and this is 4 yards. So you would want to use 5 or 5.5 for the sewing video because this dress is long and not as short as the trendy one. And because I don't have enough fabric, I went in with 2 inches to spread and 3.5 gap space, as you can see in the video. I also go ahead to mark in 1/2 inch on the bottom line in order to join the down part of my dress to the top part of my dress. And you can see the chalk. I will go ahead to cut this out, and I'll also place it on top of the other part because I need 2 pieces of it, and I'm going to pin down so to cut. I will set the down part aside and go ahead in cutting my upper part. So I've gone ahead to cut both my main fabric and the lining piece together, and this is what I have for both the front and the back of my dress. So I'll also go ahead to show you guys how you can join these together. But first of all, you need to give allowance to the side where you would join both the front and the back. So this part, the allowance is already there, so we didn't give allowance there. So in joining this back, I'm going to take off the pattern paper, and mind you, I also interface this fabric and notch where needed. So I'm going to join with the 1/2 inch allowance that I gave, making sure that the right side is facing the right side. Then I'm going to go ahead to pin that down. I'll go ahead to stitch this part and also do the same thing to the other side of my back. I'll set it aside and I'll take off the pattern paper on the front, and I'm going to do the same thing that I did to the back. I'm going to join the right side of my front to the right side of my center front facing the other right side of my mid front together, and I'm going to pin like you see me doing in this video. So go ahead and do the same. I'm going to pin, and mind you, like I said, there is a notch, so you will not end up making mistake. Make sure that you notch, so you follow the notch as you can see. I also go ahead to sew there and also stitch along the 1/2 inch allowance that I gave. So in working with the cape on the front dress, what I'm going to do is to pin both the lining piece and the main fabric. I'm going to pin them together and I'm going to sew like so. But this was a mistake because you're meant to sew the other way and not the way that I showed you guys right now. But I'm going to show you guys how you're going to sew while I show you guys the mistake that I did, because I already sewed this before realizing that I didn't sew it right. So I'm going to go ahead to loosen this part to sew the right part. And meanwhile, this is how the front part of my dress is looking at this point. I've gone ahead to give it a good press, and also with the back, I've gone ahead to give the back a good press. So I'm going to join the back and the front together. So I'll go ahead to stitch this up, leaving 1 inch allowance space where this cape is going to sit, and I'll show you guys what I mean. So like I said, I'm going to go ahead to stitch, giving 1 inch allowance on that part, then stitch the rest with the allowance that I gave. So I've gone ahead to loosen that part. As you can see, that was where I had the error. I was meant to sew this way, so please don't do the same mistake that I did. This is where we're going to join to the armhole side. So I've gone ahead to lose that part, and I've gone ahead to correct my mistake. So this is how this is meant to be. So in joining the cape, I'm going to bring the fabric, and this is the space that I told you to leave, so we'll join the cape together. So I'm going to place the cape on the main fabric, leaving 1/2 inch allowance, and I'm going to pin down like so. So this is what I have, guys, and I've already left 1/2 inch allowance. I'll also do the same thing to this other side. I'm going to go ahead to pin down like I did to the other side. Next, I'll go ahead to sew with 1/2 inch on both sides that I pinned down. And if you're following along, I would advise you do the same for your own fabric. And what I'm going to do is to turn that part that we left open and stitch up. So this is what I have after I was done sewing. So you should arrive at this if you're following along. And the next thing I'm going to do is to set this aside to work with my client's bra cup. So I'm going to cut a full circle. So this is how you fold it. You fold and fold again, as you can see in the video. So what I'm going to cut is 4 inch round. So as you can see, I've folded my fabric and I'm going to mark 4 inch round the pattern paper. So go ahead and do the same. Depend on the size of your cup, but I think this is moderate. For a cup of 36 to 38, you can use this. So I'll go ahead to curve this, tracing the lines that I already marked out. I'm going to go ahead to curve like so, and I'll go ahead to cut this out. So we have a full circle and I divide it into, that means we have half cycle. I'm going to mark 1.5 on this side and also do the same thing on the other side and get the midpoint, and I'm going to connect with my ruler like so. So go ahead and do the same, and I'm going to go ahead to cut this out. So I'll place this on this interface, is a light one. I'm going to place it like so, and I'll place the other one on the other side like so. I'll just pin down and cut. So this is what we have, guys. I'll go ahead to take off the pin, and we have 4 pieces of this. I'm going to go ahead to join these together, but first of all I'm going to join this like so, and I'm just going to take off this little bulge on the side of my cup, and I'm going to join this like so. I'll be using a straight stitch. So what I did was just to place both together, like I'll place one together to sit on the other side, and I'm going to sew like you see me doing in this video. But if you have a zigzag stitch, you can use that, but if you don't have, you can still follow this method, and I'll show you that you'll still arrive at the same result. So I'll go ahead to finish this up carefully and do the same to the second cup. After I was done, this is what I have. The cup is cupping, guys. So this is what I have. I have 2 pieces of this. I'm going to place this on my fabric like so. So this is what I have. I'm going to make sure that the midpoint of this is at the midpoint of my client cup, and the underbust is also at the underbust. That's why you need to give a notch. So I'll go over to using this to hold it in place on the dress. So watch closely to see how I did this, and I'll give it a good press. this is it, guys, after I was done, and I'll do the same thing to the second part of my bust. And this is literally it, guys. So I'll go over to joining both the lining piece to the main fabric. So this is the lining piece. The only difference is the lining piece does not have the cape. So you should have, like, the cutting is just the same. The only difference, like I said, is that the lining pieces does not have the cape that is on the front. So I'll just go ahead to pin this there. But first, I'm going to go ahead to create my sleeve. So if you've not seen the drafting pattern video, go and check it. I'll leave the link below. What we created was 13 inches for our sleeve, and I'm going to place that 13 inches here, and I'm going to mark the line like so, and I'll divide it into two like so, and I'm going to mark the line. Meanwhile, I want my sleeve to end at 4 inches, and I'm going to mark 5 inches for my client. So go ahead and do the same. So what I'm going to do, depending on whatever measurements you want for your client, just add extra 1 inch like you see me doing in this video, and just follow along. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to mark ½ inch from the midpoint of 13 inches, which is 6.5, and I'm going to connect it to meet A, and let's just say the other one, let's call the other one B. So like so. So the next thing I'm going to do is to mark in my sleeve length, which is 4 inches, and I'm going to also connect the 4 inches to A1 and B1, if that makes sense. So I'll just connect those lines like so. So from the point, which is the midpoint, I'll call it C, I'm going to curve to meet A. So just curve till you're comfortable with it. I just curve till I'm comfortable with the shape that I have. I'm also going to do the same thing from the C connecting to the B. I'm just going to curve till I'm comfortable with what I have, and afterwards, if you're okay with what you have, you can go ahead to either give the allowance here or cut and give the allowance later. Afterwards, I'll go ahead to slash and open, but oops, I'm going to also use pin to hold that part. And depending on how you want the ruche to be, I'm going to use 3 inches for my client, and I'm going to just step it down, and I'm going to mark 3 inches to that 4 inch that we have in this area. So this is what I have for my client's sleeve. So if you're comfortable with that, you can go ahead to place it on your pattern. So that part is where the elastic is going to sit. So I've gone ahead to cut in my pattern on my main fabric, and this is where my elastic is going to sit. So I'll go ahead to notch that part. Okay, so you can also most people create like lining piece for this, but this is just a very light fabric and I don't want to add a lining piece. So I'm going to fold in a bit with the allowance that I gave, and I'll do the same thing to the other sleeve, and I'll show you guys what we have. So this is what I have after I was done. So I'll also do the same thing to this part like we did to the other side. I'll also fold and fold again, and I'll stitch. But this time around, I'm going to take you guys to my sewing machine to show you guys how we went about in fixing the elastic on the side. So that's it. I'll also go ahead to pin down. You can pin down first and sew gradually, or you can also watch closely and see how I do that. So you just have to go ahead to stitch following the pin, the way you pin down. So when you get to that point where we notch, as you can see, I'll go ahead to place the elastic on it, and I'll stitch closer to the elastic, and I'll top stitch on that elastic, and I'll just push the elastic aside and fold while I stitch. But this time around, I'm not going to stitch on the elastic. I'll just take it slow because the space that we have, it's a very small space. I'm going to stitch while trying to prevent the elastic from getting to the stitch. So this is very easy, but if you don't understand, you can just slow down and go back to watch to understand. Like I said, I'll just step the elastic aside and stitch. So when I get to the end point, I'll just stop stitch and I'll bring it out to drag the elastic till I'm very comfortable with it. Like, we gave 3 inches allowance, so we should be comfortable with something close to 3 inch when you stretch. And I will go ahead to cut the elastic while I top stitch if I'm comfortable with what I have. And I'm just going to go ahead to cut it out like so, and go ahead in folding my sleeve. So this is what I did, and I will just do the same thing to the other side, and I'll show you guys what we have. After I was done, our sleeves are ready, and I'll go ahead to fix this on my main fabric. So I'll just place one side of the sleeve to the point closer to my armhole, and I'm going to pin down. So mind you, the part that has the elastic is where that will face the center of my dress, and I'm going to also do the same thing to the back, but I'll just pin down, and I'm going to also bring my pattern paper to be sure that where I place the sleeve is the right part. So I'll just check this. This is why it's good you have a dot or a notch on that part. So I'm going to take off my sleeve and place at the right side where it's meant to sit, and afterwards I'm going to go ahead to fold in with my lining piece. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead to place my lining piece, making sure that it's facing where it's meant to face, that they are all like mirroring each other and it's right sides facing each other. I'm going to pin down, and I'll also do the same thing to the other side of my dress, and I'll show you guys what I have. So I'll go ahead to stitch with the allowance that I gave. I'll go ahead to stitch this up, but there's this rope on the front side. I've gone ahead to pipe it up. I'm going to place it by this side of the dress, although my client was like she doesn't want the rope because she is going to be wearing it with a net. So we also end up taking it off, but this is the way you can place your rope. Just put it there and sew along. So this is what I have after I was done. This is the elastic, the rope, not elastic, sorry, the rope that I was talking about. Okay, so I'll go ahead to close this part of the side so I can end up fixing my zip. And I'll do that, and I'll show you guys what I have after I was done. I'll just, fold it inside, right side facing each other. I'm going to sew it like so. I'll do the same thing to the other side of my top, and I'll show you guys what we have. This is what we have, guys. I'll go ahead to fix the zip and I'll show you guys. So I've gone ahead to fix the zip, and this is what I have, guys. At this point, I'm going to bring the down part, which I already created a loose stitch to gather. I feel like I've done a lot of gathering video in my channel, so you can go ahead to check it out if you don't know how. I've gone ahead to fix the other gathers on the dress, and I'll show you guys how I did the second one. So in case you don't have your midpoint because you've already gathered your dress. The best part to do it is from the bottom part of your gather stitch. Just trace it like you see me tracing it, like so. This will give you where the midpoint of the gathers will be. So just place it by the side like you see me doing at this point. I'm going to go ahead to pin it down. So the next thing I'm going to do is to pin down the midpoint, making sure that the midpoint is at the center of my dress. And the next thing I'm going to do is to trace the notch. Like I said, you need to notch your dress. So the notch where the gathers is meant to stop, I'm going to also pin down where the gathers will stop. As you can see, I will just have to gather it at that point. But first of all, I had to pin down and gather like you see me doing. So this is just it. Just gather it till you get to that point. So this is why I said you need like 5 to 5.5 inch. This gathers was just very little, but my client likes it that way. But make sure that when you want to sew this dress, if you want a full gather, you should have more volume to it, unlike mine. So I'll go ahead to do the other part and I'll show you guys what we have. So I'll go ahead to sew straight down. So if you have a lining piece, you have to lay both the lining piece and the main fabric together like we did here and stitch straight down. So afterwards, I'm going to show you guys what we have. So this is what it's meant to look, and this is it, guys. I'm done with this tutorial. And if this video was helpful, please leave a comment below. And I've gone ahead to do the hem part of my dress. And this is it, guys. Please do it to leave a comment and subscribe to my channel. And I will see you in my next one.